breaker, breaker into the black. This is Long Haul Preacher and I ain't going back.
Howdy y'all, and excuse the voice, I'm just getting over a cold. Don't worry, it's not the coronavirus. I hope y'all liked the first sermon of this new format for Long Haul Preacher, and this week we started into the first family-oriented podcast by looking at what family second and self last means. I think I touched on this a while back when I first started doing podcasts, but this is a good time to look at it again from a fresh perspective of events as they're currently unfolding in the 21st century. Now, before we get into that, you'll notice I took down the live look that I've been trying to use. I tried to use with a sermon this time through. It didn't look very good, and I need a little practice on video editing to get it right. Some of you guys commented on this. The mouth was not following what the sound was. And the reason is the Logitech camera software that I'm using does not give my mic a monophonic non-stereo connection. So I tried to edit that in, and it required that I separate the video from the audio, and then I wasn't able to get the audio to align quite right. So sorry about that. We'll leave it at that. Not to mention, I don't like showing my messy office space. Now, since this month is the only month I will be doing a full video form until I can afford the time to do this full time, I'm not seeing this as a problem. Now, if you disagree with me, you want me to show more vid, make sure to shoot me an email or add a comment to YouTube or Patreon about it. On the other hand, if you agree that this needs more podcast, less ugly mug, leave me a comment on that as well. Now then, family second, self last. When I first started this whole thing out, I had just heard a sermon that made a whole lot of sense to me. According to the Bible, and especially Jesus Christ's teaching, we are to place ourselves last. I'll do a sermon on that eventually, later. But needless to say, we are also supposed to put God first. Well then, who comes second? Well, here's a clue. Not the world. Anything of the rest of the world should not be second. But this podcast is not supposed to be a sermon, so let me put an armchair psychological and sociological metaphor on this thing and take it from this father's perspective. I am the captain of a boat at sea. If I do not take care of that boat, I am not likely to survive very long if that boat fails. And when it fails, I have nobody else to blame but myself. The same is true for life. My family is my support structure against life's storms, as much as I am their support structure. But if I have not cared for it, it will not support me. While not the loudest reason, my wife's law office has seen the number one reason for divorce being a communication breakdown followed quickly by a relationship breakdown, often at the cost of the kids. So there it is in a nutshell. That is why family must be second in my life and I must always be last. Now, let me break down how that looks in my life, and feel free to debate it on YouTube or Patreon if you like. I do not have the comments open on the website, so sorry about that. But you can debate it on YouTube and Patreon. Now, first, there's my wife. Now, it's no secret that we've had our differences. She stuck with me through many years and many trials, no pun intended, praying to God to keep the family together. And as I look back on our lives, it was God that kept us together. But more than that was taking the time to be together. For one anniversary, for example, I cooked up a 5-course Greek dinner, bought the DVD, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It was less about the money spent, much more about the time taken in preparing and the time spent just being with her. Maybe this dates us a bit, but we now consider shopping trips while Freya's away with her grandparents as dating for the same reason. We know that spending time as a family is one thing, and as a husband and wife is another. We budget our time wisely, making sure to give time to both, even if that means pizza in a warehouse store or shopping for Freya's birthday presents as our dates. Whatever else there may be, there must be time together. Now, with Freya, she came into our lives following my mistakes. You see, we had previously taken in two teenage boys who would otherwise have ended up in foster care, but that was jumping into parenting blindly, kind of like trying to make friends with a bull while a cow is in heat. No, I do not recommend it without a owner's manual or something. That was just a mess. But the one thing I wanted to give them, if I could, was time as a family. That didn't work out so well, but it was what I had hoped for. Live and learn. With Freya, it was different. You see, with her, we got the chance, as my wife put it, to make our own mistakes. But just starting off with her as a baby gave me the first-hand look as to what it truly meant to put my family before me. You see, my wife doing most of her work, she was the one actually making all the money. I had a client here and there, but she was the one bringing home the bacon, as they say. I jumped into this new parenthood, just jumping into it, doing the night shift with a 2-day-old baby. Her feedings would last as long as they would last, and I spent more time out of bed than in bed. I ended up working half days, napping in the afternoon in my office space, often napping with her, and still doing most of the caring for baby Freya so my wife could do all the work. Now, as she grew, my wife's law office also grew, and it grew to need my seldom used office space for a conference room. So then I spent a little time at home with Freya. Yes, we could have hired daycare, but I understood even then what I feel like looking back on it now. I can never get that time back. In the life of a child, you only have around 10 years, more or less, of being with them as a child, another 8 years being their mentor for a teenager. And then we're both looking at each other as adults. That's it. That's the entire amount of time Frey and I will have together. I would not trade the time I spend with Freya for the universe, pun intended. I am in this for the long haul. Now she is 4, only months away from her start into school. There's no way I can convince all of you the importance of this moment in your own lives, a decision you could make for a better life. So instead of continuing this, let me just end this podcast with a thought paraphrased from a bunch of people I have grown to greatly respect from the website All Pro Dad. How does a father want to be remembered? He wants to be remembered as someone who was there. It is not enough to be physically present. I also shouldn't be constantly looking at my phone or the clock. I need to be both physically and mentally and emotionally present. Freya needs me to be there for her to talk to as much as to play with. My wife needs me to be listening and, when the time is right, to solve problems. Both need me to stand up for them and be the biblical father, the one who guides them spiritually through life's storms. Number 2, a father wants to be remembered as someone who cares. My wife and Freya need to both know that I do care when they hurt, that I love them enough to let go of something when I am doing something that hurts them. I need to be willing to put their needs above my own. And finally, a father wants to be remembered as someone who did everything they could to help. I'm not just there to fix things as they get broken. I am the one they turn to when they need more permanent answers. While this is not always convenient or even necessary, that is the stereotypical role of the father in the family as the fixer. I just need to remember that helping is not necessarily fixing. If you think that putting your family before yourself is somehow a hardship, remember this: it is only a hardship if you make it one. Take the time to get to know your family every day. They are a part of who you are. That is the best way you can help them through life's storms. Thanks for joining me this week. If you like this and you want to hear more, please like this on YouTube and on Patreon. Please be sure to subscribe. Next week is the fun week. I don't know what I'm doing yet. It's got to be fast, though, because I got to be down in Phoenix the week after that. In fact, since I don't have any Patreons yet, I'm not anticipating doing any more podcasts this month. We'll move on to the first week of April, another sermon. Again, if you have any comments about how I'm doing this for 2020, please let me know. I really do want to hear from you. You can email me at info@longhaulpreacher.space. You can leave a comment, of course, on YouTube or Patreon. You can drop me a message at either of those spaces. But please, let me know if you think this is going the wrong direction. I do want to hear from you. And in the meantime, hey, y'all just stay loyal to your families. Have fun out there. God bless.